as well. And I finally have Mr. Mohammed Muhi. Who I think is also not there. So finally, Ms. Sara Mustafa.
Yes, hi, I am Sara Mustafa. I am originally a pharmacist, and now I am a PhD candidate at the UC at the Global Public Health Program. And my thesis will be working on the longitudinal study of Al-Saha with Dr. Mohammed Saleh. Inshallah.
That's great. Inshallah. Okay, great. So I hope this then is very useful to a lot of you, because the point of doing interviews or trying to do surveys with these difficult to reach populations is that, of course, as many of you know, there are populations where we don't really know much about them. So you can't just find a list on the registry of those people who belong to this population and then do interviews with them to collect information. So what do we really mean by that? So I'll go into quite a lot of detail today about how we did surveys on such populations. What are these populations, and why it's important to do surveys with these particular population, especially when it comes to collecting information on them. So, as I said, what are these hard to reach subpopulations? I would like to ask if anybody knows or has heard the term of hard to reach. Hello? Okay. Has anybody heard what these are, what these populations can be?
Yes, please, Dr. Mai, let me try.
Yeah.
I think hard to reach may means it's geographically away from me, or culturally away from my way of thinking, or literally, or something related to the language, different accent or different language.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have anything to say? So just unmute yourself and talk, because unfortunately I can't see the whole list. Okay, so that is right to an extent. So part of it is exactly this: those individuals who are very different from you culturally, but it's also those individuals who do not want to talk to people. So those, I pulled out a definition here, which are these disadvantaged parts of the population. So homeless people, people who are mentally ill, those who dropped out of high school or in some kind of criminal activity, or are runaways, or in some way not part of the society that we usually deal with. Is that clear?
Yeah.
To reach is because of these two main issues. First of all, because they are not part of what we usually think about as the normal society. So those people who are on some kind of registry in the government that has their addresses and their names and the kind of legal statuses they have, it's difficult, first of all, to know how many people fall within these groups. And second of all, they also have a very big privacy concern, mainly that they're too scared to talk about their experiences or their work. So a lot of you here, or actually most of you, are in the health section. So what we're talking about, for instance, are drug addicts, for instance. They're very difficult to know. I actually tried to find how much of the Egyptian population can be thought of as part of this kind of hidden population. It's very difficult to come up with any numbers, because they're, in part, they are very difficult to see and to interact with within the culture, at least for us, right? So the reasons for non-inclusion, and by non-inclusion here, I mean not inclusion in normal ways of getting into or getting a list of survey participants, is that there is no registry data. First of all, does everybody understand what registry data means?
Yeah, we understand.
Okay, good. Sorry, I just don't know what has been covered, what has not been covered, and how much statistical background everyone has. So I will ask these questions. Please feel free also to interrupt me at any time and to ask any questions. So yeah, so either A, they're not on any kind of registry data. So for our case, what a group of people we were trying to interview are people who are undocumented or do not have the legal status to stay in Germany. Therefore, by definition, we could not find them on any registry data, or it would cost too much to be able to actually get them in a normal survey. Mainly that it would be too much money spent trying to find them and trying to interview them. And therefore, this part of effort of trying to go to certain places and get these individuals is also too high. And finally, that they themselves do not want to be included. And that's why we need to kind of treat them in a way very, you have to treat them very specially. You have to treat them in a way that, first of all, they trust you, and then that they would then be able to conduct these interviews with you. And therefore, that is exactly what we're going to cover today, at least how we did it. I think my thing stopped. Yes. So first thing I want to talk about is examples in Egypt, so that it's a little bit clearer what I mean here by these hidden populations. So first of all, these are the main things in the literature when we talk about these hidden populations. The first one is informal market laborers. The problem in Egypt is that a lot of work in Egypt is actually done informally, but usually there is, of course, that you are on some kind of labor ministry registry, and therefore you are considered in the formal market. But there is, of course, actually around 61% of those who are working in the non-agricultural sector in Egypt who are considered to be in this informal or black market work. Then there's substance abusers. So as I said, drug addicts or alcohol addicts, which I found this number. I'm not 100% sure if this is actually, I'm pretty sure this is a lower range. That's about estimated to be about 12% of the population in Egypt in 2018. There's also victims of violence. So here we're talking about women who have been physically abused, or children who have been abused, or even men who have been abused, which if we just think about Egypt, it's about 17% of women in 2015. Then there's a huge range, of course, of this difficult population when we think of migrants, and especially those who are staying illegally in a country. Finally, or two more things that we can see are, of course, sex workers or people who work as prostitutes. And finally, those without national identifications, which I'm not sure actually what the percent in Egypt is, but that's the point, right? If we want to interview, you want to make sure that you're getting the whole population, especially if you're thinking about health problems in the population. There may be some characteristics that are different between people who are officially registered and those who don't even have a national identification card. So, as I said, it's really important for you or for us to make sure that these individuals are in our sample originally in order for it to be representative. And does anybody have any questions about what that means, representativeness?
No questions, but a comment regarding data. From my point of view, it's not actually true in Egypt.
What is not actually true?
Percentage represented in this slide.
So as I said,
or actual, or what is the source for this data?
So I did put the sources right there. However, as I said, these I'm pretty sure are lower bounds. If you have a better source, please do tell me.
It's not that. It's not done actually in Egypt.
What do you mean by it's not done in Egypt?
A survey to get this percentage is not done in Egypt.
So this is what I mean. So if, for instance, if you look at the victims of violence, right? This is the United Nations, one of the United Nations organizations that looks at women problems in the world. They estimate that it's around 17% of women. You're right that that could actually be completely incorrect, especially as exactly what you just said. There are no surveys, and there is definitely no registry data that can give us these numbers, right? So this is what I mean by the numbers are not known. These are the estimations that, for instance, the Ministry of Social Solidarity gave, that around 10% of the population in 2018 were substance abusers. Do you believe that number? I don't know if I would, right? And that's exactly the point. If you really want to make sure that a survey is representative, and especially if you're looking at health problems that affect different aspects of the society, these are the kind of individuals that you want to ensure that you cover within your survey. So, any other questions? Okay. So as you all know, that a sample is simply the fact that we cannot interview the entire population, and therefore we pull out a number of individuals that we hope covers the majority of the kind of characteristics that we would find in the population, right? And in order to ensure that this sample is representative. And therefore, as we said, we want to make sure that these individuals are covered within the sample that that we draw. And there's different ways of doing so. The classical way, of course, is that you get some form of registry data, and then you randomly select individuals from there based on some characteristics that you know are within the population, in order to make sure that, for instance, you have enough women, enough men, enough higher educated, enough lower educated individual in your sample before you start making some kind of inference or some kind of statistical analysis with this data. We need to do this in order to make sure that the sample that we have has external validity. So the question now becomes, how do we do this with a group of individuals that are inherently or are not part of this original group, or let's say within the listing of the individuals that we have on the registry data? Does anybody have an idea? Okay, so one way we can do this is just trying to get a big enough sample, right? Going and trying to get enough individuals to do our survey. But of course, as we know from a lot of different experiences, that size does not mean that we have the correct sample distributions that we need. And therefore, there are two ways of usually doing sampling. As I said, there's this probability or random sampling, which I heard Patoun already talking about, which is just randomly selecting individuals, usually from a registry sample, or this non-probability sampling, where you decide, okay, I want to only interview women because I'm interested in women's healthcare or health problems and healthcare problems, or I'm only interested in looking at the, I don't know, only at very educated people, so only individuals who have university degrees or higher. This is what non-probability sampling is. And as we already discussed, usually it's a combination of the two, right? You get a registry sample, you already know the characteristics of how many individuals, so you want roughly 50-50 split between men and women. You want to make sure that it's 90% Muslim, 10% Christian, and so on and so forth. And then you randomly select individuals from this registry data and you try to interview them. But then the problem with a hidden population is, as I said, there is no registry data. one of the biggest things before we go into sampling and how we can do sampling is convincing people of doing a survey. Has anybody had any experience before doing surveys? And how did they convince people to partake in their survey?
Hi, Mai.
Yeah.
I've tried to, I conducted a survey as part of a research, but it was among the university students, the adolescents. It was a bit easy. They were enthusiastic to know about the healthy diet, the pattern, their anthropometric measures. This is part of the research, and we managed to do it over 4,000 students from all over the universities of Egypt. They were collecting in what we so-called أسبوع شباب الجامعات in our university, but very few of them were reluctant to participate.
Okay.
Maybe some maybe difficult to get to be interviewed when we do smaller research in the hospital. They do reviews, even if you give them incentives as if lab for free or treatment or so. But this is on very small scale because research maybe 200, for example, مبحوث فممكن تعوضيهم. لكن survey كبيرة الحقيقة I didn't face I hadn't been into the experience before.
Okay, but that's a exactly, but that's a really good point, right? So, and this is why there's a lot of surveys with students, because students are a typical population or subpopulation that they have a high trust level, so they don't care. They are like, okay, yeah, sure, you have a survey, I know what research is, no problem, I can do your survey. But now if we think about doing, for instance, exactly this, if you're in hospitals and you're talking to people who have diabetes, they definitely may be a bit more reluctant to be able to do your survey. Yes. And what we found is that the way to do so is, or the best way is by explaining. So we basically have to explain to them what is a survey, what do we collect, and how do we collect it, why do we collect it, how this data will then be used in the future, what is research sometimes, and then we also gave examples of this, how these data is used. And finally, what I will talk about is also a little bit of helpful hints that we had to try to get these populations to be able to do the survey with us. So what is a survey? And this is kind of an example of the kind of information that we gave to people. So we gave a very broad definition about what surveys are. So a survey allows us to collect information on da-da-da-da. So in our case, we cared about demographic data, behavior, attitudes, future plans of people. In your survey, it may be health behaviors or medications that they take. And that we then say this information allows us to draw conclusions or insights about the whole population. And then we use this data to be able to recommend policy changes, right? So the types of data, and as you already possibly know, is that we can get these surveys through either personal manner. So you have this questionnaire, which is what you are doing. I'm not sure if you've already decided if you're going to do it as a computer assistant or a telephone interview or a paper interview, or paper pencil interview. And then you have these unstructured interviews, which is more into what Hamad said about these qualitative surveys. On the offline, there, of course, as we've also been talking a lot about, or at least I heard you guys talking about, is the point of mailing in questionnaires and online questionnaires, and also just giving out open answers or open questions to have people answer them. But what we focus on and what we did was the computer-assisted questionnaire. And that basically meant that we had a questionnaire that was on was put on some application, and was filled out with the interviewee using a computer, right? And the kind of different kind of information that we've collected were, yeah, obviously demographic information, but we also then asked about life history information. So life history has to do with all kinds of information that has to do with everything that a person has done up till now. So their education, their occupation, all of their marriage spells, how many times they were married, how many children they have. Because we were interested in migration, we also have a lot of, well, we collected a lot of information about how their migration, how they migrated basically from one country to the next and their legal trajectories through it. Moreover, we also had, and you find this quite a lot in economics, a lot of questionnaires that focus on choices or preferences. So basically giving a list or two lists or three lists of things and telling an individual, okay, you have option 1, option 2, or option 3, which one would you choose? And these are also then included to kind of study the behaviors of individuals. And of course, life choices. And here, life choices for us were mainly to do with migration choices. So would you migrate to a particular place, or would you invest in education or language when you are in Germany? So I would like to think of, I would like to actually hear from you what kind of questions that you're all thinking about adding in your studies.
If I may add, it's not questions to be added, it's like to know which question
Sorry.
This pilot of the pilot to understand after validating the questionnaire of share, and we adopted here in Egypt to see whether
Sarah, can you say it again?
Or not, and which questions to.
So you're saying that you're going to take the questions from share and then validate if they work in the Egyptian context. Is that correct? Someone who heard her, maybe?
We couldn't hear you, Sarah.
So this phase of the project of the survey, we need to know after validating the question of the original questionnaire of share, after adapting it here in Egypt, whether it will work out or not. So it's about changing the questions or tweaking the questions to be more culturally adaptable here to the questionnaire right now. We will know that, I guess, after we start the field work.
No, that's definitely a point. But so you're not going to create any new questions, from my understanding.
So far, we need to know first where do we stand before thinking of adding more questions.
Then, if you're talking about share, the question, I know that they have a lot of these different, basically every single one of these topics, or every one of these topics is somewhat covered, right? So you have a lot of health things in the subjective and objective health. You have questions on networks. You have question on choice preferences. And we'll talk about translating this to these kind of groups later on, but you can see now the problem that you may get basically in trying to validate this for Egypt, right? You have to think about these different subpopulations in Egypt and how they will take a question. For instance, one of the questions that we have in share is, how do you rate your own health, right?
Yes.
I don't know how well, I don't know how well that would work in Egypt. I mean, from my family, I'm pretty sure everyone would say my health is horrible. So maybe you need to think a little bit more about how to frame this in a way that is understandable to this group of people who are definitely much more different than Europeans, right? So
Yes,
but that's
exactly.
exactly the point. So some of the problems that we had in our survey were things to do with the cognitive testing, for instance. They didn't easily work, for instance, because we took some of the share questions on cognitive abilities and asked them to Syrian Afghan asylum seekers in Germany. So, you know, the asylum seekers, whenever I say that, I mean the refugees. So I think you all know that in 2014 and 15, there was about 1.2 million people who came to Germany. And these are the people that were some of the people that we interviewed, for instance. And that was very difficult, interviewing them with explaining to them why we are doing tests on them. And thankfully we were successful, but it could definitely have gone the other way around. But that's the point. So how we were able to get people to participate is to be about what we're using this data for. So we told them or explained that the data will be used for research papers and policy briefs and reports. I'm not sure what else I think you are probably going to publish in a lot of medical journals, right? Are there any other kind of, exactly. Is there anything else that, I'm not sure if you're going to do any government policy work with the data?
That would be later on, not in the first place.
Not in the pilot study.
No, not now.
Exactly. Okay. So yeah, so these are the kind of things that we had to explain, and we had to explain it in a way that that they understood. What helped for us to do this is we gave a lot of examples about how the data was used. Mainly, we were also open about who is going to be reading this data. So in our case, we were going to publish these results in journals, but there's also a part of the Max Planck which does policy recommendations for the German government. And so we were also open about this, that the information that we're collecting is going to be read by, by researchers, by policymakers, and by anybody who's also interested. I mean, that they themselves can read it if they wanted. And the way we did this is that we gave them information or sent an information letter to those individuals we sampled from the registry sample, which had a similar format as this. So we gave it both in German and in Arabic. And what we did was we showed exactly how the information is going to be collected. So how it looks like on the computer and how the numbers would look like afterwards. And we stressed that the data is not going to be in an individual level. So that person A, B, and C said this, but that there's 41% of Syrians are women and 63% are men. This kind of information that looked more at the sample or at the population level than on their own individual answers. We also made sure to write about how the information is going to be collected. And when they're there, so in the interviewing setting, and also what we're going to do with the data afterwards, so that the data is collected. This is how we received your information. This is who we are. And this is what we're going to do with the data afterwards. Any questions so far?
No, all good, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I'm used to giving this talk with people there, so it's a little bit difficult with when it's online, but let's try it. So as an example, so as I said, we did these 2 refugee surveys, and the first one We did it on Syrian asylum seekers or Syrian refugees. The reason we chose Syrian refugees is because they were the number one group of people who came. There was not a lot of information on them. And we wanted to test or look at their abilities. So the kind of information, excuse me, the kind of information, sorry, so the kind of skills they came to Germany and also test these skills. So that was one survey that we had. And the other survey, which actually a lot of this talk comes from, is the survey that looked at people from Afghanistan. And the reason we chose those people are, they are the second most amount of people came from Afghanistan to Germany in the last 6 years. But until this year, actually, they actually had the highest probability of not getting some kind of legal status in Germany, which meant that a lot of them can become illegal. And what we wanted to know is how many people would then overstay the right to stay here and what their future plans would be. So those were the two surveys that we did. And the first thing we did is we explained to them specifically what a refugee survey is. And the first thing was who we are. So we explained, okay, we are the Munich Center for the Economics of Aging. So it's a bit different than SHARE. You have been talking to people in SHARE for, I think, the last 2 days or so. But the Max Planck Institute, which I work in, is actually kind of two parts. The first one is the SHARE project that you are, I think, more aware about. And the other center is called the Munich Center for the Economics of Aging, where we do other forms of research, part of it with the shared data and also from other data. So we explained that this is who we are. We are a publicly funded institute. We study economic aspects of demographic change, and these are the 4 topics that we look at. So we look at pension systems, long-term care. So this is all of this, all of these topics about how to take care or how basically the aging population in Germany or in Europe will be taken care of as they get older, health topics, and also migration. And the reason why we had migration is because there's quite a lot of literature that suggests that in the position that Europe is in, one way to make it easier for economic development later on is to have migrants come in to basically fill the skill gap that is going to happen in the next 10 years. And that is where our focus was on. That's why in the Syrian case, we were looking at all of these questions on what skills did they come with and where is the gap in the skills. In the Afghan case, as I said, the focus was because these are the second most populous people who came. But as you can see here, they were the ones who got negative legal statuses much more than the Syrians and the Iraqis. And we were very clear about this in the information that we gave to the future participants. The reason we did this was not to give them a headache, but because we wanted to show them that this really, the studies that we're doing are really and truly for research reasons and for science reasons, and that we were not part of any government initiative to get information that they did not give in their interviews. Are there any questions so far? No, thank you. Okay, so we also defined exactly what we're going to study. So in these studies, we stated that, okay, in the surveys that we have, we are going to concentrate on the problems that migrants have when they come in, whether their basic needs, so whether their food, living situation, education was taken care of, what their motivations were, especially when it comes to what we always call integration. So how well they partake in the society, or what more skills they get in education or in work. And we had an entire section on what their expectations and their future plans were. And why I'm bringing this up is because this is an example of how sometimes you have in your head an idea of questions that you want to put into the survey, or in your case, validating the share questionnaire that you do not think will be problematic, but are actually very problematic to get a group of individuals who are usually these kind of populations are usually very low educated or can be very low educated, how then you can get this information across. And so we then explained to them, who we are, then what our survey was about, and then we then explained the target population that we were looking for. So in our case, the target population were individuals who were 18 years or older. So we usually cannot interview children. I don't know if we probably won't actually interview children, but children are a very interesting part of the population to interview, I have to say, but they come up with a whole different set of problems. And we explained that it had to be people who were born in Afghanistan or Syria, or had the citizenship. The reason we had to explain this is that in a lot of cases, especially in the second survey where we actually gave money, so we gave monetary incentives, we wanted to make sure that we explain that these are the people we need to do the interviews with, and anybody else is not within our target population. So it's all about explaining who you're going for, right? So they also understand who you are talking about. And again, so as I said, we were concentrating on those who came in the last wave of migration, and we focused on these 3 cities. So we focused on Berlin, Hamburg, and Munich. In the case of the Afghans survey, but for the Syrian survey, we only focused on Munich. And that has to do with how the distribution of the refugees, how they were put in different places in Germany, and also has to do with your constraints, right? So you that you're willing to put into the surveys. So from what I understand is that you are going to do probably some kind of, the pilot will be some form of convenience sample of the 3, is it the 3 universities, or how does the sampling, have you thought about the sampling and how that will work in the Egypt Share project?
Yeah, we're just starting off at 5 universities. Each university will start with 100 participants so far. This whole step is just to test the questionnaire and to find whether it will crowd or not.
So these will be students?
No, there are people over 50.
Okay, so there will be people over 50 that will be through the networks of the 5
universities, yes.
Okay, exactly. But I mean, in future, when you want to make this on a bigger scale, of course, I mean, that's already a target population, right? So you already have a network that you're going to be connecting into to be able to get to your people. But you would, what we're gonna do later on, hopefully it works, is that I want you guys to think a little bit beyond the pilot study. So beyond now, think, let's say 4 years in the future, how then are you going to do the target population? Because this will help a lot in knowing what kind of ways that you would need to structure your survey. If you do have these kind of populations, especially if we're talking about people who are, let's say, are very old, 80 to 90 years old in Egypt, who are difficult to reach because they have these barriers to get to them, right? They have their
Yes.
family members. How will you actually get to these people in order for you to get your sample as representative as possible?
Yes, I think one of the upsides that the whole 5 universities, all of them are medical backgrounds or medical specialties, so it would, the access would be easy to these kind of populations. Even the older population of people over 70 or 80s, they go to the hospitals, they go to the doctors, so I think we can have access to them.
But do you think is that, I think that's a big assumption. That's an assumption that you're making, that people have the capabilities to be able to get to the hospitals. Are you sure that you're getting everybody in the population or the majority of the population in this way? There could be people who, for instance, their family does not have the money to send them to hospitals.
Yes.
And in those, you're not going to get to these people.
No, we need to think about it. Yes, and you have a point.
I mean, you're right in that. I mean, there's also a public health. I mean, we do have a public health system in Egypt, but still, I can think of people in villages who live very far away from any kind of clinic. How their health are compared to people who, let's just say, on a distance level are closer. Those can be completely different. And
yes.
If you don't try to include that you're looking at.
True, but I have a question. Do we have to overwhelm ourselves with all these details? Because in Egypt, it's not as easy as the other countries. So we're trying to take it one step at a time at first, and then we can expand.
Yeah, بالضبط. I mean, this is just giving you an overview of how you can handle it. I don't think you're going to do this in the next couple of years at all, even if in the next decade. I'm not sure. You need to build it little by little, right?
True.
So you need to make sure you have a working sample, and then after that to see, okay, who are we missing in our surveys and how can we get to them? And this is why we are giving this kind of information, just so that you have it in the back of your head of like, okay, in the future, we will probably need to do this. So for instance, in translating right now, we need to kind of think a little bit, otherwise we're going to have to do all of this again in 5 years or 10 years time, right?
Right. Yes.
So that's the point. Also to just show the wide range of kind of what can and what cannot be done. That's the point here. But you're right. In the next, I don't want to overwhelm anyone. This is
no. I'm just we're trying to figure it out together.
Yeah. No, that's definitely the case, and a lot of this is trial and error. So this is why we're just explaining, or at least, so my part is just giving you our experiences here on reaching these really difficult people, so that you have it in your mind if you A, want to include them now, probably not, or B, you want to include them in the future.
True. Thank you.
Okay, so what we did is that we first did this introduction slide, and we showed it to the interviewer. So when the people came to do interviews, we had this introduction slide, which had all of the information that we discussed earlier. And what I wanted to ask, but we kind of already talked about it, is what kind of populations that we're thinking about in Egypt. So again, for the future, not right now. I don't want anyone to think that I'm, oh, what's happened here? Okay. I wanted to do a bit of an exercise with you all for just a couple of, for about a half an hour or so, where I want you to put yourself in this position where you think about populations, and that in Egypt that can fall under these hidden population examples, as we said, and then try to come up with sort of a plan of introduction. Because for us, what we found the most important thing was to get them to trust you from the get-go, right? So what first of all, let's think of examples of populations in Egypt. So does anybody have an idea in your research? So I don't know the kind of things you're interested in, but for one thing that we thought about just now are those who have perhaps cognitive difficulties, right? So are there any other kind of groups of people in health research that are more difficult to talk to or to reach than others in your experience?
I think aging in general is big obstacles in dealing with a group of people. Aging, actually, for myself, I think my mother totally have great changes in her personality, so that our regular talks take another shape. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, so personality changes, or people who suffer these personality disorders in old age. So I also know that there is a problem when it comes to the oldest old. I actually don't know. Does anybody know? So the oldest old are people who are older than 80 years old. Do you guys know what the part of, or the percentage of the population that are over 80 years old in Egypt?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's because that's one thing. If you're talking about an aging population, that's one thing I know in Share they have a huge problem with. Trying to interview people who are over 80 years old.
I know that people over 60 years, they about 6.8 million in Egypt after in the last survey that done last year. Maybe about 3 or 4%, maybe above 80. I don't have the number of people above 80 right now with me, but I can share it with you as soon as I find this information.
Yeah, that's fine. So it's just the idea of, okay, so even if you want to get this later on, this representative sample, let's say it's 3%.
As far as I know, they less than 500,000 people, less than over 80 years old.
So I mean, we're talking about very small numbers.
Yes, but above 60, they are 6.7 or 6.8 million.
Which is about, how much is Egypt right now? 100 million, right?
102 million.
Yeah, we reached 102. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's something like 6% of the population. It's crazy. I'm sorry. It's just crazy to me right now that we reached 102 million. Wow. But exactly. So, I mean, this is the kind of ideas that we're thinking of when it comes to these kind of populations in Egypt. I'm also wondering if you're going to do any interviews later on with people, for instance, in any Madinat Nasr, in the garbage city. Are you also thinking of that in the future? Not, of course, right now. So
again, please, the question, what do you mean?
So there is this group of, of people from Madinat Nasr. I don't even know if they're still in Madinat Nasr. What we like to call garbage city, which I know don't like to talk to people. So العشوائيات basically. So I don't know. I mean, عشوائيات I feel like are difficult. I'm not sure if they will do interviews.
You are talking about Madinat Nasr or talking about Masjid Nasr?
عشوائيات is one thing.
Masjid Nasr is, yes, garbage collector village.
Yeah, بالضبط. Has anybody tried to do interviews with people there?
Many years ago, I did a small survey with Dr. Salah Al-Haggar from physics department here in AOC with قرية الزبالين in منشية ناصر. It was about recycling paper, plastics, environmental sustainability and things like that.
Yeah. But so did you find it easy to talk with them?
Because we are going through one of the biggest NGOs there.
Okay, so you also had the network connection. Yeah. And that's the point. I mean, that we'll talk about later, doing these kind of connections to get to these people. But I'm pretty sure if you just showed up and said, "Hey, hi, I want to do an interview with you."
No, for sure. By any means, you can't do this. So you have to have something named gatekeeper or get open.
Exactly. So these gatekeepers that we'll also talk about. It would be really nice if you talk to us. We'll talk about gatekeepers and in the end, and you can tell us your experience with these gatekeepers from us. So I'll tell to you about gatekeepers in the henna. But that's exactly the point of getting to these individuals. It's very difficult. So what I would like to do is if everyone can just take about 15 to 20 minutes and think about, so if you, I mean, you can of course do the validation study if you want, but I would encourage you to think a little bit beyond the validation study and think about the future and think about a survey frame, the kind of people you would want to have who would fall under these populations that we just discussed, and the kind of questions that you will ask them. So the kind of questions when it comes to the topics that we discussed, it's health, cognitive issues. And then I would like you to answer questions about how to introduce yourself to them. So try to come up with a framework such as what we discussed right now of explaining in a way they would understand, not the way you would understand. So no technical words, of who you are, what your survey is about, what you're going to collect from them, and how you will use it. Is that clear? Just as a small exercise to kind of get you starting to think about these, let's say, sampling framing issues for this kind of subpopulation. No? So we'll give you
mean in Arabic or what?
Sorry?
Do you mean in Arabic?
بالعربي بالإنجليزي زي ما انتوا عايزين. I don't care. So I mean, it's just a brainstorming for you, and then we will talk about it بعدين. يعني everyone, like, people can introduce their idea and how they would do it.
Is that related to aging, or it's for any type of topics?
Whatever you are interested in and you want to do research on, whether you want to do it on aging or you have some other project that focuses on these people that you, or a group of people that you want to do. It's completely open to you.
To my opinion, if we start to do the survey, we should see some friends or relatives or something like that to start the first part of the survey with them. And when we complete with them one survey, this will give us a trust and things like that to start with other people, to my opinion.
I don't think that's true. So, I mean, getting trust already from your friends or your acquaintances is easy. They know you, they know that you're not going to hurt them, they know that you're not anyone who is going to in any way do something bad to them. What you, I mean, in the end, when you, I mean, the pilot study will be, yes, this is what we mean by convenience, that you will talk to your friends and your acquaintances. But in the bigger, when you do the bigger share project later on, then who you're thinking about are not these people. You're thinking of complete strangers who do not know you, who do not trust you, who will probably run away from you if you come to them. So this is, you're right, in the pilot, it will be much easier. But the point of doing this kind of exercise and this kind of training is getting you to think about the next step after, right? So how would you do it if you don't know that person?
even am I piloting with friends, family members, neighbors, is very early stage of piloting. Piloting is it must at some stage, at some time, it has to be with strangers at a real field, with real people away of me.
Exactly.
And I prefer that piloting يعني should be away of the real sample.
I mean, that is the best thing you can do. So, I mean, when we did our pilot, we did not do it with people we know. But you mentioned that you were the initial study may be with people you know. I don't know what you all agreed upon and what you're going to do. That's of course something up to you to decide. But this is to get you to think about the step after, exactly, those who you don't know.
Okay.
So I will close my camera and come back in about 15 minutes. Is that okay with everyone?
Actually, we get so tired.
Okay, do you want to? Yeah, I know, I feel bad. You were supposed to have a half-hour break.
It's now
how about?
It's now 3:40. Let's make it come back and discuss this exercise.
Let's make it
3:50.
4 o'clock. Let's say 4 o'clock. You also then have 5 minutes to take a break. And then we have the 2.5 hours afterwards. We can discuss the rest. I know that you have not had a break. I put in breaks into my presentation, by the way, but I feel bad because I know you did not have a break at all since the morning. So how about we do until 4? Is that okay with everyone? And then you think about what we discussed now and to prepare something and also take a break, a water break or whatever you need.
How much time do we need after 4?
We will see. I mean, I think 2.5 hours should do it. But I mean, if we have to take away one of the breaks, that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Is that okay with everyone?
Excuse me, you need after 4 2.5 hours?
Well, yes, the whole thing was supposed to be 4 hours long. So my training was from 2:30 to 6:30.
Okay.
And I know that you did not have your break between 2 and 2:30.
That's fine.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that would be okay to give you a bit more time.
Okay, great. Okay. Let's come back at 4.
Let's come back at 4. Okay. But please prepare something so that we can discuss it.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Thank you. Guys. And I wanted to know if anybody wants to share their thoughts.
Please, May, let me understand more. You want us to explain the way we will speak by it to the people we will meet in the survey, or what do you mean?
Yes. So what I wanted you to do is to come up with a plan on how you're going to introduce your survey, yourself, to these complete strangers to get them to participate in your survey.
Okay. Clear? Let me, it's clear now. Let me speak in Arabic, please.
مفيش أي مشكلة.
في البداية أنا هعرف نفسي للشخص ده، هقول له أنا مثلا اسمي دكتورة أمل، أنا شغالة في بحث تبع أيا كان الجهة أو تبع وزارة الصحة مثلا، واسمح لي أتعرف على حضرتك. فهيبدأ يقول اسمه، فهقول له إحنا دلوقتي حضرتك مشارك معانا في بحث عن كبار السن، هنعرف من حضرتك، نحب نعرف من حضرتك بعض المعلومات عن حضرتك، السن، الدخل، الناس اللي انت عايش معاهم، اولاد حضرتك، والداتا دي هتبقى مفيده جدا لتحسين الخدمات. هنستخدم الداتا الداتا دي طبعا بدون ذكر اسم حضرتك، بس نستخدم البيانات دي لتحسين الخدمات المقدمة لكبار السن وللتعرف على احتياجاتكم مثلا. وهنقوله طبعا الزمن البحث متوقع ان هو يكون في خلال مثلا ساعة، ساعة ونص، ساعتين، زي ما تكون البايلوت قالت. وهل حضرتك موافق ان انت تجري البحث ده، او اولادك يساعدنا في بعض البيانات لو انت مش هتقدر؟ بس اعتقد ده يعني دي كانترودكشن ممكن ان احنا نستخدمها مع الاشخاص اللي احنا هنجري معاهم البحث يعني.
بالظبط. هو الحاجه اللي انا اضيفها بس اللي هي الحته هي التوبكس بالظبط اللي انتوا هتكفر في السيرفي بتاعتكم.
بالظبط الايتمز،
بحيث ان هو الايتمز اللي هو هنتكلم على كذا وكذا وكذا بالظبط، عشان بس ما يتفاجئش اي حاجه هو مش شايفها هتحصل بالظبط. فهي ما هو دوت الفكره. في اي حد تاني عنده حاجه عايز يقولها؟
ممكن بس نبلغه برضه ان انت عندك مطلق الحريه ترد على اسئله او ما تردش عليها. اي حاجه مش واضحه قدامك ممكن تسالها لي، اي سؤال حسيت ان انت مش عايز ترد عليه او مش حابب براحتك تماما، مفيش اي مشكله، عشان برضه ما يبقاش حاسين ان في ضغط يعني في الاسئله.
بالظبط هنتكلم في الموضوع دوت بعدين، بس هي دي النقطه.
طيب يعني من اللي امل قالته من اللي ساره قالته يبقى احنا كده بنتكلم على كونسنت فورم.
هو حته منها كونسنت فورم. يعني في part consent انا مش عارفه لو هو if you need to really have a consent form وهم يمضوا، بس في البوبيليشنز دي معظم الوقت اللي هو ما فيش حاجه you shouldn't actually have them sign اي حاجه، عشان الفكره اللي هي you're not supposed to have any معلومات عليهم او منهم بعد الستدي.
اصل يعني اللي بيخليني اقول موضوع الكونسنت فورم ان في فرق بين الكونسنت فورم اللي هي لازم تبقى عشان اخد موافقه IRB من الجامعه او من اي حته ثانيه وابتدي اشتغل، وفي فرق بين الاكسرسايز اللي حضرتك عاملاه، لان يعني الاكسرسايز اكبر شويه من ان هو كونسنت فورم. يعني المفروض في نوعيه الاسئله والتوبيك وازاي الاسئله دي بتجاوب وانا مين وهعمل ايه بالداتا ديت، يعني فده شويه مور يعني لاير اكبر شويه او اعمق شويه من ان هي مجرد ان الناس توافق ان هي تعمل المقابله.
ما هي في الكونسنت فورم يعني اوبتيمالي اللي انت عندك كل الحاجات دي فيها اصلا، يعني تبقى عندك كل الديتيلز دي في الكونسنت فورم. الكونسنت فورم بس مش اللي هو اوكي عايز تعمل الانترفيو معانا ولا لا. الكونسنت فورم هنا هو اتليست في المانيا لازم يبقى محطوط كل الحاجات دي.
تمام، بس بقول لك ان اللي انت عاملاه في الاكسرسايز دوت شويه بيبقى يعني اكتر من الكونسنت فورم العاديه الطبيعيه اللي
هي ما ده ايديا اللي هو الاول. الايديا اللي هو first of all you're supposed to think على الاسئله دي عشان اولا to put in your simple framework، وبعدين to use this information على الكونسنت فورم او في الكونسنت فورم اللي انت هتعمله.
اوكي موافق، يعني متفق.
فاهم قصدي؟
اوكي
بالظبط. فهي this is the starting point. you think اللي هو اوكي انا how am I going to introduce نفسي للشخص دوت. you're supposed to have a big idea of course. انت مش ممكن تكتب كل حاجه، بس at least اللي انت عندك الفكره على اساس ان هو لو حد جه سالك، او حتى لو انت especially if you're going to have interviewers مش كده يعني you yourself are not going بس you're going to send out interviewers. الانترفيورز دولت كمان يبقوا لازم يبقوا عارفين الحاجات دي in their mind عشان لما يجوا يتكلموا يعرفوا يبينوا الستايل دوت بالشكل اللي انت عايزه قدام الناس.
اوكي
فاهم قصدي؟ بس هو that's true يعني أنا I wanted a little bit more detail بس يعني we should maybe move on. that's okay. So I just asked generally إيه الفكرة what people were thinking. Do you have more detail?
No, totally agree مع كل اللي اتقال.
Yeah. ممكن في أي حد عايز يضيف أي حاجة ثانية؟ Okay, good. كنا هنبقى عندنا break بس أنا خلاص أخذنا البريك بتاعتنا. The second thing we're going to talk about is this issue of building trust. And especially we're just going to show, I'm going to speak about how we built trust in these communities اللي هم the 2 refugee communities اللي احنا رحنا لهم. the first thing we did اللي هو we stress بالضبط الحتة اللي احنا اتكلمنا لسه فيها اللي هو that the data is protected and that none of the data will be tracked. يعني it's not going to be used to track anybody, but it's going to only be used for science. And in our experience, we actually had to explain يعني ايه science أصلا. I don't know لو أي حد جاله يعني had this experience قبل كده that they actually had to explain يعني ايه study يعني ايه science يعني ايه بحث. Do you want to say anything?
لا هو مش للدرجة دي يعني بس not explaining the meaning of science بس إنه يعني إيه بحث وإحنا بنعمله ليه هما دي يعني people need to understand in detail مش إنه بس بنعمل بحث عشان نطلع نتائج دي ممكن ما تتفهمش خالص.
بالظبط.
نتائج عشان نحسن الصحة عشان نعمل بيها كذا كذا ف the more detail that we give يعني بتسهل الدنيا.
بالظبط. طب أنتي عندك any experience how you brought up الidea دوت في مصر؟ عشان أنا really يعني في مصر I don't know how to actually explain that. هنا هوت is يعني a little bit easier than مصر شوية.
لا إنه بقى يعني بنبتدي إن إحنا هنسأل شوية أسئلة إحنا بنعمل بحث أنتي هنعمل إيه إحنا دلوقتي كل الحاجات اللي أنتي هتردي عليها دي مثلا أو ترد عليا بيها عشان نطمن على صحتك من ناحية 1 2 3 وإحنا الداتا دي هنستخدمها في 1 2 3.
أوكي. فاللي هي حطيتي اللي هو اللي عشان نطمن على صحتك. So you added اللي هو دي حاجة
إن في added value بالنسبة له وفي حاجة بالنسبة لي ف whatever incentive that we have on different researches يعني كل واحد بقى حسب هو هيبقى بيشتغل على إيه.
Okay. فكرة كويسة. Good. What we also did كمان اللي هو أولاً before we went into anything إحنا we talked to the community leaders that we talked about this a little bit قبل كده before the break موضوع ال gatekeepers. We found it very 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 helpful اللي نروح في كل community ونتكلم for instance لأي حد اللي عنده أي leadership في الكوميونتي عشان يعرف إحنا مين عشان لما هم يعني لو حد سألهم هم عارفين الستوري بتاعتنا واحنا مين وممكن يطمنوا الناس علينا. We also did حاجة اسمها awareness campaign and I'll show you what we did with the awareness campaign and we also showed the screen مع قدام الناس. So what we did was we moved the computer أو التابلت so that the interviewee ممكن يشوف احنا بنعمل ايه بالظبط وبنكتب ايه بالظبط. Okay. So how did we encourage people? But as I said, we went to, especially when we were talking about the Afghan refugees, because هم ما عندهمش ورق يقعدوا في ألمانيا, we really went to يعني we went to a lot of different centers and يعني جماعات yeah, basically we went to a lot of centers where there were Afghan leaders وهي في أصلا في community في Berlin وهامبورغ وميونخ that caters or that helps the Afghan migrants هنا and we talk to them directly to be able to get to people. We also عشان هنا هو the way they do it is that they put the refugees in different housing من الحكومة. We went and talked to the people who were controlling these centers. So the Germans there that were the ones who were administrating il centers دولت. We also then sent this letter of invitation and then that's where the letter of consent was already أصلاً محطوط. But that had all of this information that we discussed قبل كده. And we used this thing about rewarding participation. So we actually gave, in the second study, we gave monetary incentives. So we gave money for participating and money for referring someone to the study. And I'll explain why we did this. But basically, these were the way or how we did our awareness campaign.
ممكن معي بس معي لو سمحت. ايوه انا بس دلوقتي مشكله الانسنتيفز او الريواردز اللي هي الفلوس هل دي مشكلتها في ممكن تاثر على
البايس بتاع
بتاع الاجابات يعني هي المشكله هنا هي مشجعه وتجيب لنا ناس كثيره بس how biased is the
بالضبط. Okay, so this is a question that goes back and forth. So as I said, there's a different sampling method that we use to try to get to these people who don't want to be interviewed. And you need to give them some kind of incentive اللي هم يجوا أصلا. Of course, you always have to be wary of the kind of bias that you're introducing. We don't think that there was much of a bias that was introduced in الإجابات اللي احنا عندنا. But of course, that's always something that you have to worry about. In your case, in the share case, I don't think that's going to be a problem because I don't think you're going to use incentives like this, the way that we used it. But what I've been trying to talk about اللي هي الموضوع اللي هو the population that you cannot reach, right? And in that way, you kind of need to incentivize them to come somehow, right? And there's been quite a lot of studies that show that the bias is not that large. But so we'll talk about this in a couple of minutes to show exactly what I mean by that, why it's used in this particular sampling strategy اللي احنا استعملناها.
May, before moving forward, the invitation letters you sent to them, in what language?
كان بالألماني ولو in the Syrians بالعربي و for the Afghans في داري أو باشتو. شو ما بيكلموا داري وباشتو.
اوكي يعني كانت باللوكال لانجوج بتاعت كل حد انت
بالضبط.
اوكي.
Yeah. We had a problem with the translation of that, but we'll talk about that also in a minute. Okay, so yeah, so the point of the awareness campaign was to just to inform them قبل ما احنا نروح على فكرة, this is us, so that they know and they're not surprised and they know exactly who we are and they can ask about us. We had a website that they can go on and they can check us out and they can ask any questions. And we also had contact information and we were very open so that they can easily get in contact with us and ask any question. This is how the awareness campaign looked like. As you said, كان في اللي هو letter of invitation دوت. Plus شو في سؤال؟
أحد راح الدرس.
لا في حد معه. Okay, فكان في this is the invitation letter. As I said, مكتوب عليه الإيميل. يعني we had an email and we had a number, we had a website that they can go on. ويسألوا, and we explained exactly how we talked about before, who we are, what we're doing, what we're collecting. كان في كمان we put flyers for the Afghan sample. We put flyers في كل حتة اللي احنا عرفنا نلاقيها في السوبر ماركتس الأفغان بيروحوها المدارس اللي هم كانوا بيروحوها. We literally we did a lot of research نعرف الناس دولت بيروحوا فين و how can we get information دي ليهم, right? So, and we left all of this stuff there. We left the flyers, we left the invitation letters. We sent the invitation letters from the registry sample or to the registry sample. So we really spent a lot of time months or so for كل city, just establishing ties قبل ما احنا نروح ونعمل interviews and giving information to people. We also had these kind of folded brochures that people can take that gave all the information for both Dari and Pashto. In the Syrian case, عشان هم كانوا قاعدين في centers, we didn't need to give all this information, so we only sent out the invitation letter وكلمنا ال centers, and the people that are running the centers gave that information. So of course, again, it depends على who your target population is and how hard it is to get to them. For the Afghan population, because it was so hard, we had to invest so much time making all of this material عشان هم يعرفوا احنا مين. Yes, Ella? Okay. Finally, we try to provide a secure place. Again, because these population were very afraid to do interviews. what we tried to do for the Syrians, because they were living in these housing centers, we tried to find a room where they can have their privacy in doing interviews, where we tried to make sure their children were not there. And we found that, especially for women, if they had their kids there, they cannot really concentrate, of course, on doing the interview. And they sometimes cannot, especially if the child is older and can understand, would not want to answer some of the questions. Same thing with the partner. So we tried to make sure that the partner was also not there, to make sure that there was no influence on the questions or the answer of the person, because their partner, their husband or their wife was there, and that there were no other people who can actually hear them. For the refugees, for the Syrian refugees, these were rooms in the centers they lived in. But for the Afghan refugees, what we did was we actually we rented rooms and whole floors of different places that we knew that Afghan migrants went to. And that had to do that we got that information from talking to the leaders, the Afghan leaders, knowing where people went. And then from them, we rented these rooms. And what we did was we tried to set up the interviewing situation in a way that everyone, so here is respondent, here is I is an interviewer, and here is a supervisor, which I will talk about why we had a supervisor in each of the center. But we tried to space people away from each other so that they don't listen to each other, or they don't hear each other. We also made sure that everybody who was not taking an interview was outside of the room. And also we put an area for the family, so that the family does not also interrupt the respondent. And we found that it worked very well, actually. In some places, we even had places for the kids to play and stuff like that. And this is done in a lot of studies that are trying to get to these populations, to try to make them feel that they have a place where they can talk without anybody knowing what they're saying or interfering in what they're saying.
The supervisor was from the research team or from the center?
So we had two. We had one supervisor who was a sort of an interviewer, but also a person who can actually speak the language, and also was someone who would be trusted by the community. So we actually tried to find older guys, because we realized that it was older men who people would listen to, because there were sometimes we were worried that some people would get physical. So we tried to get someone who would be, let's say, some people would listen to. And there was also a team member there to make sure that everything worked.
But the supervisor from the center, his presence can affect the answers of the questions?
No, because he did not have to do with the interviews. So he had nothing to do with the interviewers, or there was in here, these people were on their own, working on their own. The supervisor did not interfere, only if the interviewer did not know how to ask something. Then they would talk to the supervisor or the team member who's there.
Okay.
And this way, we also made sure that, first of all, because we could not take any, especially for the Afghan situation, we could not write down anybody's name or anybody's address. This is going to be different for you because you actually have the name and the address. So we could not write down anything. So we needed a supervisor to make sure that people don't come in twice, for instance, to do the interview. But we also wanted to make sure that it's someone that can, so what happened is the respondent would come in, he would go to the supervisor would check that they have an invitation, and we'll talk about the invitations in a minute. And then the supervisor would assign it to one of the interviewers. And then he would sit and make sure that everything is okay and that everybody has what they have and nobody is being bothered.
Okay, great.
Yeah, but this is in the case where you really have a population that you cannot, the security, data security, and the worries are really big. I don't think you're going to have this yet unless you really want to talk to people who are, let's say, illegal or doing something illegal from us. I don't know. So this is, but because we wanted to talk to people who did not have a document, فما عندهمش يعني passport أو أي حاجة معاهم. This is why we had to go to this level of security.
community leaders في الأماكن اللي هننزل فيها ممكن يبقوا supervisors.
No. A supervisor دوت someone we hired. We did not take anyone from the community.
Yes.
But it's people we hired and we trained so that they know the interview نفسه, the survey itself, ويعرفوا answer أي question على أي حاجة ويعرفوا يتصرفوا. They were not people from the community.
Yes.
Community leaders أصلاً كانوا مش قاعدين هنا. Because you don't want anyone, you don't want anyone to influence, so you don't want to put the community leaders there.
Community leaders عندنا في البابليك هيلث اللي هو بيبقى شخص معروف وموثوق به داخل المكان في القرية زي شيخ البلد أو العمدة
أيوة
أو أي
بالضبط.
شخص مثلا حد أستاذ في الجامعة حد في الشرطة جيش أي حد بيبقى مسموع له كلمته والناس
أيوة.
بتثق فيه بحيث إن إحنا بنستخدمه في القوافل الطبية إن هو بيمهد لنا البيئة والقرية وبيمهد لنا الناس قبل ما ننزل.
أيوة بس بالضبط فاهم احنا استعملنا الناس دولت عشان no that's not a supervisor. احنا يعني دولت الناس اللي احنا كلمناهم عشان نعرف okay where should we put الأماكن دي and they're the ones who actually rented بقى الأماكن دي لينا بس هم كانوا مش قاعدين هنا خالص فهم يعني ما عندهمش أي علاقة بالسيرفي and we did of course اللي هم كانوا مش ممكن يقعدوا أو يسمعوا أي حاجة.
اللي دكتورة عزيزة اتفضلت وقالته يختلف عن اللي بيحصل في السوشيال ستاديز. في وقت القوافل الطبية لو العمدة أنا دخلت عن طريقه أو دخلت عن طريق شيخ الجامع أو عن أي قيادة طبيعية في القرية مفيش ما يمنع إن هو في وقت ما أنا بعمل القافلة يبقى موجود والناس شايفين يعني موجود مفيش مشكلة. إنما لو أنا بعمل سيرفي بقعد مع الناس بكلمهم بسمع منهم حاجة قد تكون سرية قد تكون حساسة قد تكون أسرارهم ما ينفعش حد يكون موجود حتى لو هو اللي موفر لي العينة وهو اللي جايب لي الناس ومقعدني عنده في المضيافة بتاعته في البيت بس في وقت ما أنا بعمل المقابلة مش مفروض إن هو يكون موجود.
تمام يا فندم هو كده صح بالظبط هو هدفه أو الهدف منه الأساسي إن هو يدي الناس ثقة للتعاون معانا.
ايوه
او يعني يقول لي المجتمع اللي عنده ان انا شخص امن
بالظبط. هو مدخل ليا عشان انا وانا شغال سواء قائد فريق البحث او الباحثين يعني ايا كانت درجه اللي بيشتغل يبقى بيشتغل وهو مطمن على نفسه لان الايثيكال كونسيدريشنز مش دايما بتبقى في ناحيه المبحوثين كمان في جزء من الاعتبارات الاخلاقيه ديت والتحذيرات اللي بنبقى بنحافظ عليها للباحثين نفسهم.
ايوه كولابريتور او كوردينيتور لا
بالظبط انما في وقت اجراء المقابلات في وقت ما احنا بنسمع من الناس هو مش مفروض يكون موجود.
لا مش موجود.
هو كمان المفروض ما يدخلش الناس اصلا يعني هو يقول لهم اللي هو انتوا مين بس المفروض كمان هو يعني he doesn't pick الناس اللي هم يبقوا في السيرفي بتاعتهم.
ما بيدخلش يا فندم هو بس بيقول للناس ان انا شخص
انا بالظبط فهو
اشتغلوا معاه يعني هي ناس امنين فاشتغلوا معاهم.
هي دي الفكره فده اللي احنا عملناه بالظبط اللي احنا اتكلمنا مع الناس الاول بعد كده عرفنا يعني احنا ممكن نعمل السنترز دولت فين وبعدين عملنا السنترز وهم كانوا مش موجودين خالص. هي دي الفكره. اوكي واخر حاجه احنا عملناها or the last thing we did was بالظبط facilitator we showed the screen again for instance for the Syrians احنا عملنا اللي هي سألنا انتوا كنتوا عايشين فين وانتوا عندكم 10 سنين ده سؤال actually في share يعني ورينا السكرين واحنا بنحط information for the Afghans we always had a picture of what we meant and we always showed them everything. At any time هم ممكن يشوفوا احنا بنكتب ايه بالظبط. And that really helped to make it secure for the person. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the sampling. There's different ways of sampling these populations. أول حاجة اسمها snowballing. أنا مش عارفة, have you guys you probably did some kind of snowballing قبل كده؟
طبعا السنوبولينج واحده من البيربوسيف سامبلينج وواحده من
exactly.
بتعمل لما يكون في صعوبه ان انا الاقي المفردات بتاعت العينه وتبقى يعني طبيعه البحث حساسه او صعبه او بتبقى هي دي الطريقه اللي بنشتغل بيها.
بالظبط, and that's the point of snowballing. أول حاجة you try to get some kind of random sample. Usually you don't have a registry, فأنت you try to get some kind of randomness. وبعدين you ask the respondents to give you people that can then that you can then interview بعدين. Then there's the key information sampling, that where you talk to stakeholders يعني زي العمدة, or in our case we talk to social workers or doctors or religious leaders to try to understand ايه المشاكل اللي في ال population دي. And the last thing is this time location sampling, where you can go you have to know the network that دي المشكلة في ال time location sampling. You have to know the network, you need to know where the people are, when they come, what time, in which location, and then you go there and then you try to randomly select people. But of course, في مشاكل for every single one of these. In the snowballing, first of all, because the initial draw مش random, you get the selectivity problem, right? You get a selective sample من الأول, and then the selectivity problem goes into every single chain of those who you get from the snowball sample. You also have a bias for more cooperative people, عشان you don't give money, so you are just trying to get people who would do an interview with you, and therefore people can try to what we call mask the network. They're not going to refer to people that they are worried about. And the second one, the key information sampling, the problem with this one is, أولاً, you have a personal bias. What people believe about the sample, they will tell you about this population. Especially if you go to a social worker, they only know the information that they were given by the people, and they don't have a detailed information about the population. They have a very selective experience with this population. And lastly, the time location sampling. First of all, you need to know the network. You need to be inside the network عشان تعرف okay أروح فين وأكلم مين. And this mapping is not really perfect, because nobody can know how. You cannot know the network, or you cannot know the population unless you're part of the population, right? So what we did was something that is relatively new called the respondent-driven sampling. And this has been done since 1996 by Hackathorn. Has anybody worked قبل كده the respondent-driven sampling? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. Basically, a respondent-driven sampling is snowballing, but with an econometric twist. So first of all, what you do, you get a registry sample. From the registry sample, you randomly select people the way that you would normally do it for any survey. Then you use these networks. So what they call this initial network the seeds, to ask them to refer people. And this is where the incentives come in. So you give them X number of e.g. like Egyptian pound or euros, and then you tell them you can invite up to 3 people, and every one of the people that come, you can get money for that invitation. And that's the primary incentive, is the initial money you give for them finishing the survey. And the secondary incentive is the money you give for every person they bring successfully to finish a survey with you. This way you don't have any more the masking problem, because it's in their own interest to bring people so that they can bring money to them. And the bias is less because you don't have the selectivity. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to basically, let's say you have a seed here, and this seed, let's say, is in this case, I just took it from a paper, is a Black person who is a man and who has interviewed in town number 2. This person would refer you to 2 people. These 2 people would come and they would keep referring you to people to the point where you try to get to all of the smaller networks in the population, so that the more let's say network nodes you get, the less selective the sampling becomes and the more closer to the population you get. Is that clear?
Yes.
There's a Mohammed was right. You don't really want to give incentives because it can bias some of the questions. But in doing this, you get to the population that's really difficult to get aslan. And then through the networks, you work through the networks to try to get a higher number of the population than you would normally get with the snowballing. And it's their own incentive in different backgrounds that you need.
يا جميلة.
So this is the one احنا استعملنا دي for the Afghan population, and I have to say it worked really really well.
جميلة جدا، وهي دلوقتي على فكرة الدكتورة متبعة في حاجات كتيرة في التسويق وفي الميديا وeffective, more effective.
It's more effective عشان يعني دلوقتي ما عندكش الانسنتيف اللي انت تقول لا انا مش هجيب مامتي عشان انا مش عايز مامتي to answer the survey. يبقى لو انا جبت مامتي يعني احنا we gave 20 euros في الاول، وكل واحد اللي هم جابوهم they got اولا 5 يورو، بعد كده 10 يورو، بعد كده 15 يورو، فهم كانوا ممكن ياخدوا up to 35 يورو. فالناس اللي تجيبوهم اكتر you'll get more money for it. فما فيش بقى الحته اللي هو انا مش هجيب مامتي، لا هجيب مامتي as much of the population as possible. But there's a couple of assumptions, of course, when you do this kind of sampling. And I'm going to just talk about the theory. The mathematical part I'm going to leave out, but I will refer you to the paper if you're interested in reading the mathematical proof. But it has been shown since the 1990s, you only need, I think, 3 or 4 of these nodes اللي احنا شفناهم هنا. You only need about 2 or 3 to get to a very big part of the population already. So it works very well. And it's been tested over and over again. The our assumption is that you have to have a sample where there's reciprocity. And reciprocity, if you have a person A, this person will recruit B the same way that the person B would recruit A. Right? So basically there has to be a reciprocity within the network. Yeah. Second thing, that there's a network population, people know each other, people are interconnected. مش لازم كل واحد يبقى عارف كل واحد تاني، بس that there is a connection. ولو ما فيش connection دي, what you can do you can try to find a very good seed. ايه seed اللي احنا قلناه, this is a seed, the person that first gets the initial contact. You have to have a very good person that knows a lot of people so that they can get a lot of different people to invite who are also good, that can also invite more people. And you can incentivize الناس دول أكتر so that they can get you more people. The third thing is that fee sampling with replacement, and I'm pretty sure you know what that is, that this person can be contacted again, and they would then come again. But so this is why we have a supervisor to make sure this person does not do another interview, so they cannot participate twice. Then there's an assumption of the network size, that it's big enough to be able to capture the entire sample, if possible. The point اللي هو لو عملت كده لغاية بقى 10 سنين, you'll get everybody in the population. So this is the point, that there's a big enough network size that could be useful. And the last thing is that there can be random recruitment. حتى if I invite only women, one of my friends could invite a guy or invite someone else that is not like me, that does not have my characteristics, right? And you can do this by asking attributes بتوع الناس. So as I said, mathematically, you can read this, the mathematical proof in Hackathon 1997, or if you really want to read the mathematical proof. But basically, it works off the idea that the network is a Markov process, or a Markov chain process. And through the law of large numbers, the more processes you have, or more chains you have, the bigger or the more amount of the population you will get. And therefore, the less selective and the more inclusive the sample will be, right? And what you do في الآخر اللي هو you just inversely weight كل observation by the size of each network. So once you have the whole survey and you're done and you have the data, each is then weighed by the size of that network. And so if I have a big network, the person I brought will be weighted less than someone who has a small network. And in the end, you will have a population size, basically, or overall population size that you did not have before from the registry. Yeah, دي الفكرة behind RDS. Okay. So how does this work? أولاً, as I said, we have the primary incentive and we have the secondary incentive. So what happened is that a respondent comes to the site or the center اللي احنا كنا عندنا, and they would have a coupon. The coupon دوت, they got it from the registry data, because we had a registry data from each of the 3 cities, Munich, Hamburg, Berlin. We sent out to all of these people invitations, and we gave them a coupon. They would come with this coupon, and then عندك a supervisor اللي قاعد, they would check that their eligibility اللي هي target population اللي احنا اتكلمنا عليها قبل كده, that they fall under this target population. Then they give the consent to do the interview. They do the interview, and then they get the money for doing the interview, and they are explained how you can recruit more people and how you can get more money. If a person comes from their chain, they get the second incentive. And then it happens again with the secondary incentive, right? So the person brings the other person, I invited someone, that person comes, they do an interview. I have a list of who is matched to who, and then I give that person, the initial person, the incentive money, and it keeps going, because the next person who does the interview is then given also the opportunity to invite up to 3 people, and so on and so forth, and then you get this tree. Good. So before you do all of this, of course, you have to do a study شوية to know the people or the population you're looking for. And the purpose of the study is to learn more about the target population, the social network, how it functions, if it actually works. لو هتعملوا ال RDS, does it actually work في النتورك, في الpopulation دي, هل الناس بيكلموا بعض ولا لأ? And then to identify a subpopulation, and initially, if you really can get good information, who do you go to first, the initial seeds, they will then start giving people the invitations. So people who are very well connected in this population. And then also you try to determine in network size. And that's when we talk to these community leaders. We found out for the Afghan asylum seekers, they get 300 euros في الشهر. So this is why we said, okay, 20 في الأول, وبعد كده 5 the first person comes, then 10 for the second person that comes, and 15 for the next person who comes. That's altogether about 40 euros. But that's already a huge amount of money للناس اللي هم أصلاً عندهم 300 بس في الشهر. And that it worked perfectly عشان it was so high, the incentive اللي هم, yeah, of course, إن أنا هيجي وهعمل السبب. Right. Then we have these methods. So we review, the way you do that is you review the literature, you look at observation, and you do these focus groups, as I said. So the kind of questions you can ask لو عايزين تعملوا حاجة كده is do the population, do they network with each other? Is the survey population members have a large degree, so do they know a lot of people? And so on and so forth. I'm not going to answer all the questions. I mean, I'm not going to read all of the questions, but I can send you the slides after if you really are interested for the kind of questions you can ask. And then for the seed, you can ask, how do you get this good seed? How do you get this good person who's very well connected? And you find this information from the community leaders. They know who is well connected, right? العمدة يعرف مين عارف مين, and who you can ask to get good networks. Excuse me. And then, yeah, the logistics, which is what we talked already about. Where can I put the centers and how does it work best? And because it really depends, yani, what worked for us doesn't mean that it will work for you. So you really need to get this information من النتورك الأول, and then from there you will be successful, right? So, and this is where this idea of doing this awareness campaign came from. So this is why we provided these flyers in a different language, and we also found that doing pictures are very good, like making it للناس اللي مش عارفين يقروا يكتبوا. That was really good, to give them pictures and to make it look in a way something that they can easily pick up and look at. Exactly. And then one thing that is important, what you want to stop is this idea of curb stoning. Curb stoning يعني ايه اللي هو أنا عندي دلوقتي أنا عملت الانترفيو and I can invite people, but أنا مش عارف أي حد, I'm gonna just find الواحد اللي على الشارع, يعني when I go out أي حد في الشارع هديله البتاع دوت وهو يخش له. So this is why we had this activation period. اللي هو الكوبون cannot be used غير I think بعد 3 أو 4 أيام, so that people really have to go to their network and go and talk to and ask them and talk to them and get them to come to the interview, because what we wanted to know is again how the network looks like in each of the population. لو هم راحوا كلموا أي حد, that's not really their network, right? Finally, we had this supervisor, which in the literature is called a fixed screener, يعني حد اللي هو قاعد وبيشوف كل حد بيخش وبيطلع, make sure that they first of all qualify for the population. They're actually the people we want to have the interview with, and also that they don't interview twice. Yes, Sihan?
السلام عليكم. Can you talk about education again? اللي هم الناس اللي مش متعلمين, يعني how to deal with them.
Yeah. No problem. The best way يعني في الفلايرز نفسها كان في صور لكل حاجة, فيعني اللي هي واحدة رايحة and then with a coupon رايحة بتاع, بس يعني the best way that we found مع الناس دول اللي هم to talk to community leaders. And because we did this within the network, within the population, أصلاً الناس اللي هم الأغيان اللي كانوا في ال 3 cities كانوا هم كلهم عارفين الستادي أصلاً, فهم they can just talk to each other وعارفين يعني إيه الستادي. فالناس اللي مش عارفين الليدرز دولت والناس اللي هم أصحابهم اللي عملوا الستادي قبل كده.
تمام.
بس ده كله جه من الأويرنس كامبين, عشان إحنا قعدنا وقت كتير نتكلم على السيرفي قبل ما رحنا نعمل السيرفي. واكيد كان في كمان نمره اللي هم ممكن يكلمونا لو عايزين, بس honestly ما حدش كلمنا. ف I'm guessing اللي هو network worked really well. Okay. That's it. We also had a database اللي كنا عندنا, we didn't actually write the gender والage, يعني you can تبقى حد عنده database اللي هو supervisor يحط okay الشخص دوت جه وكان عنده شعره اسود, عينيه حمراء, خضراء ومش عارفه ايه, so like identifying الناس اللي هم جم. بس we didn't do that honestly. اللي هي النقطة اللي هو to make a database بكل ال characteristics على الناس اللي هم جم so that اللي هم جم عشان نعرف مين اللي جه ومين ما جاش. We didn't do this بس you can do this. نعم. معلش مش سامعة. Okay. I'm just going to continue. I'm going to show you an example how we did it. As I said, أولاً كنا عندنا ال registry data دي أخذناها من the 3 cities, Munich, Hamburg, and Berlin. And from there, we had the initial seed that we gave a coupon for. الشخص دوت جه. And they can get, depending on the network بتاعه, and I'll show how we figured out the network, you can get up to 3 people. In this case, for instance, واحد جاب 3 دوت ما جابش أي حد ودوت جاب 2 and so on and so forth. This is how basically our tree kind of looked like, right? Step 1, the registry for every one of the cities. With step 2, the RDS. وبعدين more and more لغاية ما في الآخر our sample was about 1,024. But so there were a couple that we also dropped and they tried to come a couple times. Right. So yeah, we talked about this. So yeah, we talked about that. فمين كان في السنترز دول we showed يعني احنا شفناهم قبل كده هوت بس again كان في الانترفيور and the Syrians they were in their houses فاحنا كنا معناش الحتة دي. Then there was the interviewee, the interviewer was supervisor, and the interviewer was just there اللي يعمل interview ما فيش أي حاجة ثانية كان بيعملها. The supervisor بقى كان there to answer additional questions, to stop the gatekeepers, to give out the money, and to make sure everything was going well. ولو كان في أي مشكلة كمان يكلمنا. Also كنا عندنا, as I said, واحد من التيم, research team كمان هناك to make sure everything works well. ما فيش أي حاجة اتسرقت ولا بتاع. Okay. So this is what it looked like. فهنا هوت we have the first subsample اللي هي registry. This is what they got. ودي كانت it was printed يعني we just the way we did it was it was a bit expensive to keep printing 2 different kind of colors, so we printed the same color coupon. But for the subsample, the first one, the registry, we already printed out the number of the coupon for them, and it doesn't have any name, as you can see. It's just when they got this invitation with the coupon, it had a made up number, and when they finished the interview, got the 20 euros, they then got a coupon book that had like this, and then we wrote in, and I'll show you how, we wrote just a new number in it. So that's exactly, so we talked about how this works. So just to be clear, so a person comes in, they receive this one, they go to the center, they finish a survey, they go with the coupon to the supervisor gives them 30 euros, and then the system اللي احنا كنا عاملينها, I think it's the next one, right? Yeah, no. A system قالت okay, this person has this person knows up to 3 people, so give them 3 numbers, and then the supervisor would write down 3 numbers and then would give it to the person, وبعدين the person يديها الكوبون دوت لأصحابه أو his family, the one with the new number. ودي بقى the second person who was invited would come with the one with the handwritten coupon. Excuse me. And these are some of the questions that we gave the supervisor to ask. Of course يعني احنا ما خليناش السوبرفايزر يقعد من غير ما يعرف بالظبط هو لازم يقول ايه. So this is the list of questions. We first tell them, okay, did you receive the coupon from the mail or from a friend عشان احنا نعرف أنهي sample? Then can you please show me the coupon? And then they checked if they were in the population. So they asked them if they were from Afghanistan, if they were over 18, and if when did they come to Germany, to make sure that they fall within the sample of the survey. So in this way, we kind of had a double check from the interviewer and from the interviewee. So we were supposed to have a break, but I think I will keep going. I had really needs a break. I'll keep going. Good. Then actually اولا قبل ما نخلص في اي اسئله on the system?
Oh, it's good.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's a lot of stories I can tell you. For instance, one thing we found very difficult اللي هو موضوع اللي هو انت عندك 18 سنه ولا لا. ففي حد كان he comes and then he's like yeah انا عندي 18 سنه بس هو كمان كان ممكن يبقى 17 سنه. This kind of thing, or so we kind of had to show, sometimes we had to ask, okay, Malish, can you show me some kind of identification? I don't want to see the name, just to make sure that you're really 18 or you're really from Afghanistan. Yeah, these are the kind of problems you can still have. Filipinos, who are not in the sample will still try to participate even if they do not fit it. And this is again why we had the supervisor عشان في السيتويشن دوت كنا عايزين حد basically يعرف يطرد الواحد دوت برا الأوضة. Basically, it's horrible that sounds, بس you need someone who can be listened to. Okay, so then there's the issue of data protection, where I don't know fully how you guys are going to do this in your own project, but I will explain how the rules هنا and how we did it. Especially عشان for the second study, عشان it was people who again did not have the documents, like a passport or a visa or أي حاجة. We had to make sure that basically no one can come to us and tell us, okay, you have to give us the information so that we can deport this person. So this is why we really did not take any information. So one of the things that we get a lot in our surveys is, how did you get my information? And هو أنا على لستة, did the police tell you to come to me? Right? And that's one thing I'm not sure that you're not going to get. But the way we dealt with it is that, again, these issues that we talked about, that we talked before to the leaders and the organizers, then we had this thing that's in the beginning that I was talking about, of explaining who we are. That's the only way that we can really find to get people to trust us, especially people who are very scared to do interviews with us. And so what we did, and I'm sure عندكم interviewers or you yourself are going to do the interview, but so what we did was we gave a script to the interviewers of exactly what to say. So we told them, hello, yeah, my name is blah, I come from the Max Planck Institute, and as we said, yeah, thank you for your interest in our survey. And exactly, I think as معلش أنا مش فاكرة مين بالضبط, Gimen said, or Sara, this idea of who we are, what is a study, how long the interview will take, and why we're doing the interview with them. We also said that if they had any questions, they can call us directly. But what we also provided is a very detailed, and if I can lay out the letter that I wrote, a very detailed part about what data protection means in Germany. And in our case, we couldn't actually get any signed consent form, because again, these people don't want to have their signature or their names on anything. So what we got was verbal consent for every single interview that we did. في أسئلة on this at this point?
No, not sure.
No?
Sorry, about the data protection. It's not only for data protection statement, but data protection after gathering data.
بالضبط. That's where we're getting right now.
Okay.
بالضبط. So it's data protection. يعني we make two distinctions. لما احنا كنا بنعمل ال training مع ال interviewers. Our distinction is about data protection of our own data اللي هي survey material itself والcomputer وكل حاجة هما بيستعملوها and anything they hear during the interviews. So that's this part. And the second thing is about how to handle the data بعدين. So the first thing we said was you should treat the interview data confidentially and that no information in the interviewer should be passed on to a third party. And third party here, we even meant that an interviewer cannot talk to another interviewer to see how this person did, or tell stories to their friends or their family about what they heard in an interview. Also, that any of the material that they received from us, the awareness campaign, the survey itself, any of the computer software that we used, that they cannot show it to anybody and they cannot give it to anybody. Because that's also a data protection, or our own intellectual rights, that this belongs to the Max Planck and therefore they cannot use it or show it. And also the point of that the interviewer, that whatever they heard in the interview has to be kept secret, right?
You cannot share this information by normal ways like email, like on a flash memory, or you have to send it through protected Google Drive or secure
password protected.
Yeah.
We gave them computers they can use, and each of these computers were password protected. They could not give out the password to anybody, and all the files were in the back end. Of course, they could not reach the back end. All of it was password protected. And also one problem I had اللي هو كان ساعات مش عارفين answer حاجة فكانوا بيبعتوا لي على WhatsApp, and I'm like, hello, data protection, you cannot send anything on WhatsApp, cannot, you can call me, sure, but you cannot send me anything on any social media, any email that is not saved or does not have a password protection, anything that is not encrypted. فكان كل حاجة really has to be fully encrypted. And they should not actually even, هم كانوا عندهم ورق, so the contact information was put on a paper. This paper cannot be copied, it cannot be lost, and they needed to give us everything back afterwards.
Yeah.
Basically. So we made sure during the survey, وبعدين بعد الsurvey, so we also wrote this in the code, the data protection اللي احنا بعتناها لكل interviewee. We have to delete all of your personal information after, I think it was 6 months after the survey. And it was actually me who was sitting there shredding all of the personal information and making sure that we don't have any personal information. Another problem that we had was that sometimes interviewers would write down personal information on the comments section in the surveys, which was, of course, illegal. And we had to go and delete all of these issues afterwards. So we had to go and change the comments to delete any of the information, any of the identifying information. Yeah? Exactly. So as I said, so first of all, is our own, they're not allowed to copy, paste anything that they hear they can't say out loud. And this part about the software, the material, everything outside, everything had to be deleted afterwards, after the interview was done. في أي أسئلة على الموضوع ده؟ So actually, عايزة أسأل أنتم, in your experience, how difficult was it to keep data protection? I don't know how it is. I guess also for medical reasons, you also have a lot of data protection or extra data protection issues that you actually have to deal with, right?
My experience with data protection is more harder than that because I'm usually using qualitative techniques. So we have voice recordings for the interviews, and it's kind of it's not only a paper or questionnaires. So we need to protect everything 100%. We put them in a lock with one person, keep this one for a certain number of months or years. It's more hard than the quantitative.
No, I can imagine. So for us, at least we can destroy stuff, right? I mean, one thing we did also, which I forgot to say, is so as I said, we had this registry data, right? The way we got the registry data is we got it on a disk that was sent, like a CD that was sent from each of the city, the register office from the cities to us by mail, and we had to sign it. And then we had to sign, of course, that we destroy it. And this disk we can only use on a computer that was not connected to the internet, and that the printer was not connected to the internet. So we had a special computer with a special printer that we then made all of the letters to send out. And then afterwards, everything had to be wiped off the computer and everything had to be destroyed, and the CDs had to be broken and I think also burnt. And yeah, so it really was, at least we can destroy the stuff. Yeah. Make sure that everything was deleted afterwards. And that's what we did.
Part of your data protection is not technology only, but also choosing your team members. And the training, and train them in a specific way. It's not only technology, but also the people, the personnel.
Exactly. So this is what I meant, that they could not talk to other people about the interview. But you're right. You have to be very specific about who you pick. But this has to do with the hiring process of the interviewer and how you choose them. We chose students that seemed very high, like very high integrity, and they knew what studies were. That's how we did it. بس أكيد يعني I know that there are problems. يعني I've heard horror. يعني I've heard so many stories about interviewers who were making up interviews. بس الحمد لله مش في السيرفي بتاعتنا احنا. بس yeah, for other surveys, this is a big problem. بس that كمان, it's not just data protection. It's also that you have good data, right? That the person that you're hiring is able to do the interview in the way you want them to do it, so that you get good information. Yeah, this is something you have to think about as well. Okay, so in the RDS sample, there are other ways also to make sure that there's anonymity or that people are not known. I'll show you how we did it, but I just want to show you that there are, in this RDS sampling framework, there are other ways of doing it. So basically, there's a systematic coupon identification or a sequential coupon. And systematic, excuse me, here. A systematic one is one where you just create coupons. يعني هنا هو you have the first seed. The seed is number 5. And this person has up to 3 people. So then you do 51, 52, 53. And then when those people invite, then it's number 1, 2, and 3. So that you know it's seed number 5 that has the that was networked with number 1 in this chain, who then networked with this number 2 in this chain. بس المشكلة هنا هو اللي هو you're subsequently making the number, right? So the numbers you have can be anywhere from from 1 digit to 4, 5, 6, 7 digits. And this can be a bit of a problem when it comes to coding بعدين. Just if anybody messes up a number, then you mess up the network. But that's one way you can do it. Another way is doing the sequential. And the sequential is that you have this was a different one. And this one is the one we used. And this one is you come up with a number, like you just automatically, randomly make up a number that's 4 digits. It's always 4 digits. And you can make it out of numbers and letters. And then you have within the system, so you can make them up already, that create another 3 that have 4 numbers and connect them directly with the initial coupon number. So I'll show you what that looks like بعدين, but basically you create all of the numbers already and you already have the mapping قبل ما انتوا تدوها لأي حد. That's a second way of doing this kind of anonymization. And lastly, it's coming up with a, I think, too complex system of having the person come up with a numbering system. For instance, you can have up to like how much is this? There's 5 different categories. So the person's initials, the initial of the mother, the birth date, and their gender, and whatever ethnic group they're from. Let's say, I don't know, Muslim, Christian, whatever. And then you do this kind of system where you add, okay, the initials of the person, the initial of the mother, and then the birth date, and it's a male, and then you have the ethnic group that it's in. And from there, you still have to have a list, a mapping of which number of this one corresponds to how many of the other numbers. I think it's complicated, but you can also do it this way, where you have this system where you can come up with the numbers on the spot. So how we did it is, as I said, we did this kind of 4-letter, 1, 2, 3, actually 5 number system. So the first one, the seed had this number. The seed would come in, the interviewer would do the interview, and when they see this, they would automatically and then if they found the number looked like this, basically, like we put the numbers in here. Okay, actually I don't have one. They would put the number in here, and then they would choose that it's from the RDS sample. So on the system, we already know which numbers are the RDS and which numbers were the registry. وبعدين بقى في الآخر we double checked اللي كل حاجة صح. This was a double checking method for us because we already had the list of the numbers that were here and the numbers that were here, and we can double check which sample they're from to build the network body. For the Syrians, it was much easier because we had the registry data, and we just, we just had like initial, like the name of the person's initials of the person, and then we deleted that afterwards. And as I said, with the personal data, and as Mohammed also said, we made sure that all of these identifying information that were printed on paper or on the computer were then shredded or destroyed afterwards, and that no one was allowed any of the copies. Also for me, I'm not allowed to have any copies. So all of the data that was collected is on a computer at work where I don't get access to it unless I go onto the official, onto the official network to be able to access this data, which is already anonymous because it does belong to the Max Planck and it does not belong to me. In the RDS sample, what we did was we asked all of these network questions. فأولاً we asked, okay, how many Afghan people do you know? Sorry, this is Dari and Pashto, فمش بالعربي, so I also find it weird عشان they look so similar. But anyway, فأولاً سألنا, okay, how many people do you know who are from Afghanistan? How many people do you know who are from Afghanistan who came since 2014? And then how many people do you know who are over 18 years old from Afghanistan who came in 2014? And then how many people do you meet regularly? Yes. Oh, excuse me. And then we had the last question about how many people do you know who do not have a visa? And the point is that in doing it this way, you want to make sure that the numbers you get are less. فهم لو قالوا okay احنا عارفين 50 هنا, here needs to be a number less than that. So 25, 10, 7, and then 5. And then from the number here 5, we know that we can at least invite up to 3 people. لو في الآخر هنا 2, then only up to 2 people. لو واحد بس يبقى 1 person. لو 0, then of course nobody. So that that chain then closes. Yeah. And this is how we have this difference between people. Most people are actually knew more than 3 people again. But so we had a maximum of 3, and we can give up to 0, 1, or 2, or 3 of these coupons. And this was determined by the system. The system said how many coupons that you were supposed to get. And then we had a different system that gave out النمر بقى بتاعت each of the coupons. So هنا we put in the number, or excuse me, yeah, the number of the seat. وبعدين we told it, okay, this person gets, let's say, 2 coupons. And then it decided, it gave 2 numbers randomly and connected them so that we can then give those 2 numbers to the other person, to them as a coupon so that they can give it to other people. Okay, في أي أسئلة؟ So the other data experience we had is, as I said, sometimes things did not go to plan. Some of the experiences we had was that the names and some of the information was written in the comments section. And we told the interviewers not to do this, but people still did it. So we went back and we deleted all of this information. Again, sometimes some people sent me copies of a person's visa on my WhatsApp, which is not, you cannot do that. So again, deleted, and I also talked to the interviewers, but that stopped after a while. Sometimes you get too much personal information on a phone call. So they tell you exactly where they live and how many kids they have and where their kids live and all of this information that also is not supposed to be, that I'm not in interviews. And we had a lot of times where the interviewers asked each other for advice, and they were not supposed to do this. They were supposed to only ask the supervisor, but this is something that can also be a case where the information was shared where it was not supposed to be shared. So do you have any experiences yourselves about how these different data experiences? Just so it's not me talking. Give me one. He's asleep. Anyway, so the last thing is that, of course, if this happens, you avoid it, you delete it, and you do your best to make sure that that is that. So I had another exercise here, but I think I'm gonna skip this. And I will say that we can have another break now before the last part. Also because I think that most people are asleep after I don't know how many hours of talking. So is it okay if we have another, let's say, 5-minute break? Or 10-minute break? And then we can come for the last bit. I think we're gonna finish early actually. Yeah?
Thank you.
So let's, no problem, I understand really. I've been to so many of these things. So let's say 10 minutes of break and then we come back.
Okay.
So
Okay.
5:25.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
No problem. Everyone.